In my opinion, having matches that don't have some sort of meaning are a detriment, like on the whole. So it created this weird position where some people wanted to play just to qualify, but they didn't really want to play like a bunch. And some people wanted to play all the way to the end, like North, so they could prove that they're the victors or whatever. But we got into this weird place where you had to play in the tournament in order to qualify for the league. So that was a non-starter. Like, obviously everyone's going to play. But then the second you qualified, a lot of the teams were like, okay, well, we don't really want to play anymore. I know Uprising and Darkstar and Tempest and Uwu especially all had zero interest in continuing to play, but the expectation was that they would. Two teams just said no, like, we don't care. And then two other teams did, but just, I guess, broke rules. But it was also like, the precedent is unclear, I think, for Venatus, because you guys were able to... Not that there's anything wrong with this, to be clear. Don't take this as an accusation. But there were, like, the videos made by you and Gear that, like, mentioned, like, we trolled in the tourney. It was hilarious. And everybody had a good laugh out of it. There was nothing wrong with that. But then we flipped the script the second when it got to finals. And while it did make sense logically, it was never put in writing anywhere easily accessible. So to say, oh, well, trolling is fine, but only if the team you're playing against agrees to it and it's not in a finals match. Like, that was way too nuanced, in my opinion, to then go and make a disqualification on it.
In response to two of these, so first of all, there weren't any matches that did not matter. Those usually referred to, like, I don't know, third place match. A lot of people might see that as just being like a pointless match because they can't win anymore. I mean, if there's money on the line, then I guess third place is relevant. But like playing when you're already lost is always bad. But all those games, people could still have won the event, so none of these matches were pointless in that sense. People should be playing to compete and to win. Secondly, the difference between our memeing is that when we meme and we win 7-0 still, and when Uru memes, they just like they either barely get through, like in their first time they memed, and then in the finals they were just getting thrashed. So they obviously weren't playing to win like VK does. So that's a very big distinction there. It's not like you flip the script to NA and say, oh, suddenly meming's back. No, when we meme, we only do it against teams we know we're going to beat thoroughly, even whilst joking around, and that's like a flex as well.
Fair, but it's like...
Yeah. And then, and it's also not, it's not like the rule just suddenly came out of nowhere to like fuck them in the finals. They were told not to do it, and they carried on doing it. So we've had instances before where like Oskov gets less than happy with us when we're memeing, and like we know not to press it too far. So we wouldn't do it in the finals, for example. I mean, if we did, we'd lose. Yeah, so it's always a good idea to follow what the organisers are saying during the finals. Not everything can be put down on a rule list, because things obviously pop up.
Well, my point is basically, I think it's Venatus' fault that it happened the way it did, not Uwu's, despite the fact that I disagree with the fact that, like, I don't think that... I'm not trying to defend...
Uwu's fault?
Because...
They threw the match.
Well, here's what I think, is... Firstly, there's no rule that says you control as long as you're going to win because the skill disparity is so large. Like, that doesn't even work on paper.
Well, there's no rules about throwing the match at all. People should expect that you play to win, and VK plays to win. Uwu throws. That's the difference.
I'm not so sure. I honestly think that they
they threw. You can't play peasants against a tier 1 team that's better than you. Team North is better than Team Uwu.
Fair.
And they tried to run meme loadouts.
But if you run meme loadouts and play to win, then what happens then? Just because they're the worst team, all of a sudden they get punished? Because we have no way of objectively proving.
I don't see a reason why you'd ever play... It shows you're not serious, first of all. I would definitely consider that throwing. But I guess you might argue, where do you draw the line? Do you call it if you don't play Executioner Sword? Because that's considered the best, or whatever. Kind of obviously, that's silly. But I think we can always say that Peasant is in no way... Like, it's not competitive. It's not like you never spend 8 points just to spend 8 points. That's not even like a... It's not a build. It's literally just trolling. It's literally just a troll build. So yeah, that's still what I throw. So that's like the clear... If they did something more subtle, like say... Well, a good example might be I Buy Power. Do you know about that?
Didn't they sandbag in a CSGO tournament or something like that? Or is that completely off?
They threw their match rate. And the thing is, they weren't very subtle about it. But they still didn't get caught until, like, eventually, like, someone admitted it, or someone's girlfriend's phone with proof got leaked. But in the match itself, you could tell they were throwing because the dedicated AWPer didn't play AWP, he just played AK. So it's just like, yeah, it's obviously you're not trying your hardest. Something like that would be harder to prove in Mordhau. So let's say, I don't know, you've got a dedicated horse main and he doesn't touch the horse for the entire game. Yeah, they might be throwing then, but, like, you can't tell for sure. If someone picks Peasant, they're throwing, and they're not even trying to hide it. They're not trying to they're not trying to be subtle. They don't want to be there. They don't want to compete. What are you doing? You're wasting time. Just forfeit. Like, if you want to lose, just forfeit.
Right, but then we get into this whole. That's another topic. Is like, um, is the forfeiting in a tournament that people deem not worth their time also considered shameful? Like you talked about how teams are afraid
Yeah,
of losing. That's why
100% it
they.
is. But I'd rather see that than just like a per attempt as running around peasants. That's even more of a mockery, I think. It's like running peasants in the final whilst losing. I'd rather they just forfeited and say they didn't want to play. And yeah, that itself would be really bad for the scene. But
I
yeah,
see.
I guess I'd probably prefer that.
So, in your opinion, you have North is in the right completely because they asked and the refs asked who to start. I'm not
Done
challenging
nothing wrong
it.
at all.
Right. So I'm just setting the precedent so we're on the same page. So North did
North
nothing
is the
wrong.
best team in NA currently, judging by this tournament.
Oh well, I think that's a dangerous game to judge by this tournament, but that's your own thing. I guess it's totally fair to do that considering. Well, right, that's a good point. I can't argue with that logic. I think the issue becomes, in my opinion, the biggest mistake in that whole thing was having matches on Sunday. The second team's qualified, it should have just been over. That way there was never an issue like this in the first place. Because in the matches that did matter, every team felt encouraged to and enjoyed participating.
Like, but do you guys not like playing the game? Do you not like playing comp? Like, what's going on?
Honestly, a lot of teams don't, man. There are some teams that are...
I get the fatigue with it, but you'd think they could still show up for 2 matches.
Well, they showed up for all the ones that mattered, but the second the incentive was gone, they were like, well, now we're just not having fun for the sake of having fun. It's like a paradox, right?
It's pretty weird. Because, yeah, VK hasn't scrimmed that much recently, but if there's a tournament, and, I mean, I don't know, if... I've had times where I didn't want to play in a tournament for no money, and then Guru's just like, yeah, you might as well. You might regret not playing it. And yeah, I think it's right. There's not much else to do in terms of like the comp scene, so but, I mean, it's easier for me to say I should play it because I can make videos out of it, whereas the average person probably can't do that. So I can see
they're
why
doing this as a hobby, and then it's just not fun because the game's not in a great spot right now. On the whole, I'm not saying.
I think the biggest issue of the game is the game modes.
Right. No, I know. That's my point, though. Is like the okay. I should rephrase.
But you say invasion's good. You say it's strategy.
I think it's better. I don't think it's good.
Oh yeah, same for sure. I think it's more interesting than skirmish, but only barely. And no, actually, it's more interesting than skirmish, but it's nowhere near. I don't think the strategies we see. Like I said, I don't think invasion has much in terms of strategy. It's more interesting for the viewers, but there's no strategy to it. Well, there's some, but it's mostly been found out already, and it's not particularly deep. And the strategies that we see are all cheese, like toolbox.
Yeah, even that. I think it'd be worth talking about the invasion meta and how it could evolve. And then, if you were to convince me that it is all cheese, then what could be done on our side to like?
So if invasion, you have the issue that everyone spawns, so that means it makes the objectives kind of painful because you get defenders that push out recklessly, and that means attackers always have to win 2 or 3 team fights. And the objectives themselves aren't particularly interesting, so you either have like multiple objectives, like the peasants. These usually take 2 minutes unless you're fucking Team Uru and it takes 7 minutes, but you're still trying somehow whilst running peasants. But those objectives you can't hold for very long because how could you split your defense when the attackers can send 6 men to attack a single point? So that's going to overwhelm one site. So the way I think about, and if there's only a single point, then yeah, you run to the issue where like you have to win 2 or 3 team fights, and then if you add toolbox to the mix, you just like build a wall around the one objective, and yeah, it's super oppressive for the attackers. So you have a situation where it's either super hard for the attackers or super hard for the defenders to like keep control of multiple areas.
So
I think that's invasion's core problem.
Well, I would say none of the top teams in NA just wall off the cart. None of them. Just because we've deemed that there are more effective ways to use that resource than just to try and make it annoying. Because people can just do like the fucking come at me tech where you just stick the barrel through the wall and place it anyway.
But, like, to be honest, I don't think you need walls at all for that objective. You just stick one person on the cart to look out for ninjas and run down barrels, and everyone else just pushes out really aggressively.
Right, but
that would be my part of what that is our approach.
Correct, but what I'm saying is you can use walls to make the job of the barrel hunters easier, for example. So if there are less places that a barrel runner could be coming from because you walled off the lanes and they can't break barricades while they're holding a barrel, then either the team will be making a push so you figure it out, or you're limiting that option off so you have less of an area you have to worry about when you are pushing out. Like, there are more effective ways to use your resources than just wall off the cart and then go hunting. Because that also opens you up to when they can come from literally any direction and all they have to do is get through one wall. It's a lot harder than if they have to stall at certain points and give you more time to figure out what's happening. It's kind of like using it to buy you time instead of using it to prevent a push entirely. It's just different.
I mean, it's hard to prove who's right here. I would have thought completely blocking off the objective 100% is always going to be more effective than leaving one path open and then they. Because what if they just beat you in that team fight? Then they got the path open. So.
Yeah, but I mean that's where melee skill comes in. Obviously, if you lose all your fights,
Okay,
you're not
but why
going to
not
win.
have melee skill on top of having a wall that needs to be broken? It seems like you get the best of both worlds.
Right, that's what I'm
there.
saying. But the wall that needs to be broken, if you just wall off the cart, you're just having team fights
Yeah,
at the cart. It's not.
Yeah, so you got the team fight, which would have at the choke with your idea, and even if they beat you in the team fight, they can't injure it, or they can't injure it, and they'd have to break the wall to even score the point.
Yeah,
That makes
but
sense.
riddle me this then. So if you have a team fight at the cart because the barricades are stopping it, so they have to kill you before they can break the barricades, then it only takes one team fight and you're out. However, if you wall it out farther than that, and maybe you have 2 builders or something like that, and you have 12 walls, and you create a choke farther out, then maybe you'll have time to trickle back and actually have two team fights before they're able to get the barrel.
I
It's
mean, you
like
can do that anyway, just pushing out and attacking people.
right, but I'm saying the fact that we're even having this conversation, in my opinion, is proof that strategy does exist on some level. I'm not convinced it's just cheese. Also, I would say the majority of NA players that play in the meta don't feel cheesed by walls. Maybe I'm just like naive.
You sure? So if someone's hidden behind if the king is hiding behind 5 walls, that one guy is like out repairing that your damage is doing, they don't find that cheesy at all in the slightest.
Um,
Because
I'm thinking about it because the
definition of
teams.
cheese.
You
Because it
think so?
takes no skill to do, and it's ultra effective.
Yeah, you also can't out repair a War Axe with Wrecker, to be clear. So by the time they get there, they're going through the wall. There's nothing you can really do about it if they've won the team fight appropriately and that sort of thing.
But you do have to like run Wrecker in that case.
Yeah, but it's 1 point. So I mean that's just choosing
Then
to
there's
let us
4 of
wisely.
them, so you still need to like break down 4.
Well, you only need 1 to get through though.
Yeah, but it takes time to break it down.
Yeah, it takes 2 hits to make it flat.
No, I guess maybe it's not that effective then. I still find it's just lazy. I think it's not really like it doesn't. I don't think it adds anything.
You don't think it adds
I don't
anything
think
at all?
the game is no, I don't think building like 4 walls to stop the king being attacked is like. I don't
Also,
think it's the peak of comp or anything.
so one of the things that I disagree with then is, have you ever played a game that includes tower defense at all?
Includes it.
The principles of like setting up fortifications to prepare for an assault to make it like more
I played
effective.
Siege.
Okay, fair. So in that example, would you say modifying the map in some way to create or close off routes is cheese?
No, because that's part of the game. I mean, if you have like a preparation phase and that's part of the game, then why would you not take that phase? The thing is, you don't need to do that in Mordhau. You could just run like a proper melee setup, and I think that's more effective as well than all this toolbox shenanigans. I think it's mostly just it's just silly.
I guess that's just disagreements in philosophy then, because I definitely think that building, while it's not active strategy, like it's not like a formation or anything, which we don't even really use those too much anymore.
Smartest use I've seen of it is from the attackers. Like if you cut off the king using toolbox, I think that's smart. But
Yeah.
I mean, even that's kind of like countering cheese, where the king just ragdolls off the top. So I mean, ideally, I don't think a game mode would revolve around toolboxes. I mean, I don't think Invasion does particularly revolve around it, but
To me, it just seems like one component of a series of strategies you can use to try and outplay your opponent.
yeah,
But
I don't completely hate it. I just don't think it's that deep. And
Okay.
then like the other strategies we see evolve is like 4 barrel rushers get prepped and like speedrun it. Again,
yeah,
that kind of seems cheesy to me.
I would say that worked a month ago, but that only works now against teams that literally haven't played Invasion. Like any good
Yeah.
team in North America is gonna be like, okay, watch for the barrel rush. It looks like they only
Exactly.
have the right
So
barricade left. It's like,
I'm just trying to think what other strategies have kind of like evolved. I mean, I watched the NA tournament and I didn't see anything because they all fucking or
well,
memed, so I didn't get to see any of it.
correct. I agree with you there. This qualifier was a horrible showcase as far as skill goes because all of the matches to set up the qualifiers were non-competitive by default because of the seeding, and then by the time it got
Yeah.
to matches that would have been seeded well, nobody really cared to play
Yeah, I
anymore.
understand.
So, yeah, I agree with you. There's nothing I can say to that. It was a bad case of whatever. I would say though that if ever you find yourself bored and looking to be red pilled, I suppose I would spectate an NA scrim if they'll let you, and see if you see anything that surprises you or not. Because if not, then maybe I'm full of shit.
I'll try and catch some league matches, I guess.
Right. And then let's assume that it is all cheese. What would you say would be a better format?
Have you seen my Gold Rush idea? I've got a document. It's pretty well thought out and structured, if I do say myself. But basically, I think you need to add importance to individual lives, and the way I've done this is made it so the attackers have 1 life, but the defenders can respawn. So it kind of deals with the issue that defending multiple objectives is impossible with like 1vx being as hard as it is.
Wait, so the attackers have 1 life?
Yes. So it's kind of like CS:GO mixed with Dark Forest Final. Did you play Shiv?
No, I did not.
Okay, basically there's 3 objectives. It's not like a plant objective. You have to break down the doors and then take gold back to your spawn.
Okay.
And the attackers, there's no regen, which is another thing, so that makes like archers a little bit more viable than they are currently. At least I don't find them that viable in EU. I think most EU players would agree with that. And it means, so there's, unlike CS where you either win like 1 round or you lose, there's like a everything in between as well. So you might get 3 bags of gold and then that can be it. Or you might do terribly, and you might bomb, and like somehow your rush fails, or like your strategy doesn't go to plan, you'll die. You don't get any gold. That'd be like a complete fail. Or you could just do spectacularly and get every gold bag on the map. You break down all 3 doors, get all the gold back to your spawn. And it depends just like how well you can coordinate your attack and how well the defense does with their push outs, and if they even risk pushing out, or how is their comms, do they scout. I think there's a lot more strategy in this than something like Invasion, where it's usually just guard the hardest objective.
Gotcha.
So do best like juggles. And
another thing I wanted to talk to you about is I heard through somebody, and I want you to speak for yourself on this because I haven't heard it from you specifically, but you mentioned that the first objective on Grad is completely and utterly pointless or something like that, like it's way too easy for the attackers.
Well, if you compare like the first objective of Grad to like the final objective, then it does seem like the first objective is barely important to the match's result, because you can hold the king objective for like 20 minutes, right? In theory, you could hold it for like an hour or hours just because of how hard it is, and if you do a really good job on the defense. But whereas the first objective, no one should really get DNF'd there. Like we all know, like 10 minutes is a bad time. Right?
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting because in NA, I would say faster than 11 minutes is really good. Slower than 10 is bad, but it's around that range.
Ultimately, it doesn't matter that much, because even if you do the first objective in 1 minute, like you could get DNF'd for like 20 minutes on that king objective because it's that difficult.
Yeah, but
and that's my problem with Invasion. Is like you can have some more interesting objectives with it, like the multiple approaches, like non-linear, but then you get caught up on the linear objective in each one. So for Tiger, it's the barrel. For Grad, it's the king. For Camp, it's pretty much all the way through. It's just the cart.
So what you're saying is, since the difficulty is not universal across the objectives, they become irrelevant as a result?
Yeah, the more interesting objectives get drowned out by the boring static objective, which ultimately ends up being you have to win 2 or 3 team fights to progress.
Gotcha. So, in my opinion, I would say the first point does actually matter, simply because it's one of those things where you need to have a plan of attack to do it well, and if you don't have a good plan of attack, you just get overwhelmed by a mechanically superior team. So there are just like, your decision making is very we saw teams that were, in my opinion, mechanically superior to other teams just straight up lose because they didn't really know what they were doing in the qualifiers. Which tells me that there is some element of like...
So what major strategy error did they make to not win? So, what I imagine happened is they just lost in the team fight.
Well, no, actually, I would say team fights matter very little on the first part of Grad, because the objective is so scattered that you should never really be together as a team.
And then it's more dual skill, I guess. Well, I mean, there are team fights to an extent. Like you see lots of team fights on like the right side of the torches.
Correct.
Usually it's like a duel on the left.
But I would say
I don't know how a more mechanically skilled team can lose there. Like.
Well, I would say part of your job on Grad, if you play it correctly, in my opinion, is to kind of move like water through the map. So you cast a net of players from. This is talking for red team, right? You cast a net of players across, and if all of the team goes to defend the pyres, for example, your job is just to ignore them and go elsewhere on the map and force them to come to you. You should never be catering to the defense if you're on red team.
Well, you eventually have to approach the pyres. That's not a bad strategy.
Yeah, but
yeah, if you can just do all the peasants first, that makes sense.
well, it's like if the team just camps at the farm and they just stake their claim there, they're just gonna lose because then they've limited themselves to losing.
The thing, they're gonna lose regardless because how can you either split up?
They're gonna lose obnoxiously quickly, is what I should say.
Yeah, you kind of do that anyway. Like I said, it's not that important of an objective. You're gonna lose it. It's just if you can hold on for it for like 5 minutes, great. But ultimately, you should be holding over the king. That's like your main priority on that map.
I don't know. I feel like there are definitely, if you don't know what you're doing, you can be DNF'd by a team that's worse than you on that objective. I'm convinced that there actually is that level of.
I don't see how, because what happens? Think, alright, go to like player micro movements. One player goes to the left. What happens to this player that he fails to do the objective? Does he run into 2 players? Because that means that on the other side, that his teammate should be overwhelming like the undernumbered defenders. Like how do you lose as a mechanically skilled team on this objective?
So here's what I would say.
Like what's happening?
No, I would say. Okay, well, losing in my mind, I guess if you are mechanically superior, you're not going to be outright DNF'd. I guess that's too bold of a claim. But I will say it will take way more time than it should and cost you the second part.
You shouldn't even do badly. I don't understand.
Okay,
I'd have to see it to believe it.
Yeah, let me explain then. If you just, as the attackers, choose to just take and win team fights each time and roll across the map, unless you win literally every single team fight and never get staggered once, you will eventually end up... What's up?
It's barely even like a team fight though, because like you get to choose which side to go to, and you can like overnumber their players. Like you got every advantage on that map as the attacker. It's really hard to keep control with the defense. So.
Correct, but teams are still able to do it, even when they're not as mechanically superior because of the way they rotate.
How can you win outnumbered and outclassed? That makes no sense to me.
Well, where are we pulling this outnumbered from?
The defenders, they can't guard both objectives with 6 players. So whichever side the attackers choose to attack first with 6 players.
Well, that's assuming they're going to be caught off guard. You can rotate alongside the team. If you're doing it well, you can have, for instance, an archer on the tea house who just watches at all times and is just constantly applying damage to make sure that they're weak before a team fight starts, and then they can call out rotates from literally anywhere on the map because you can see the whole thing.
I mean, if you're running an archer, then you're going to be even more outnumbered in the melee.
Well, it depends on how much value they get out of it before the fight starts. If an archer is worth their shit, then they should be hitting at least 5 or 6 arrows before a team fight ever starts, which is enough to get a couple people into one-shot range. And that can make a serious difference in a team fight, because the second somebody is one hit, it makes switching a much bigger threat to them, which means they'll either play scared or
That does make sense then.
things.
That is one way how less mechanically skilled melee team could, in theory, outplay them. If you have like a god archer that does indeed like hit every shot, then yeah, that's pretty much the only way that can happen.
I'm not going to claim there's a bunch of them, but there are archers in A who hit more than 50% of their shots, and it makes a significant difference in fights.
Yeah, 100%. I just feel like
is archery cheese now?
Always gonna roll through. No. I think ideally archer would be more viable. I think. I mean, NA says it is. I think any like good 6 melee lineup would roll through an NA team with an archer. I mean, that was the case in Shiv, and archer and Shiv is way more broken than it is in Mordhau. Like you can parry it. 50 damage is like the highest damage it can do to tier 3 head.
To be fair, though, you're not going to parry these arrows from these guys. They just sit on the roof and ping you in team fights until eventually somebody gets into one shot and gets taken out stupidly. It's like...
I always feel like, I don't know, I think team fights is always going to be like slightly RNG though. Even the best archer, right?
Yeah, I suppose. I just am of the opinion that there are ways that have not been explored yet that even I wouldn't know about that do involve strategy in the most literal sense of the word.
How come we haven't seen them? Like
because the mode has been out for a month.
I think you can theory craft it so easily, and it's basically been solved already. Well, we've seen like the most interesting strategies we're going to see. Just think about it.
You think there's no more room for innovation anywhere?
So many objectives with 6 people. Like it's just not viable for very long. You can't do it for like more than a few minutes. The best thing you can do is just hope to really outclass them with rotations and callouts. Like you can try your best at juggling, and that's what will separate the best teams in these objectives. Is like how well can you juggle and outclass being outnumbered for a little while. But ultimately, it's going to come down to like how well can you guard the king, or like the tough objective of each map, like the solo one.
Yeah, but I mean, the only objective that I truly think is pointless is actually the last objective on Taiga, the cart, because the way it's balanced is so heavily offensively favored that if ever they get to it,
but we've had long holds in that one.
Yeah, but that's only
that
because
one,
you're a mechanically
that,
superior team, in my opinion. Like,
I
significantly.
imagine like didn't Tempest get rushed with the barrel rush and they still won, right?
Correct. Because on the
So
last
I
objective
imagine they
there are
won because of
civics.
their hold on that card objective. That's probably how they were able to pull through.
Actually, if we want to talk about specifically that match that you were referencing, the way
Yeah.
they won was because Wizardish just decided to hard carry and he won a 1v3 on the cart and just pushed it the whole way when they were within 1 minute of losing. But
Oh, okay.
it was like,
What a god, man.
yeah, I know. He's
What an absolute god. You've lost your only EU player.
yeah, he's pretty wicked. But the whole thing was basically that match, they were outplayed, and then the carry showed up, is pretty much what happened. So everybody kind of realizes that they were outsmarted pretty much holistically, and then somebody made a really clutch play and it won them the match. As Tempest always does, they've always figured out ways to pull out wins when it matters. But the whole thing was like seeing a team that was really early in the meta, obviously. So you're not going to see. I can speak for my team at least. We have pocket strats that we think will be highly impactful that we have not shown in any sort of a tournament setting yet. I don't know. What's up?
You're not leaking them now.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. But I'm saying I can't speak for every team because maybe we're just nerds who overthink things. But I know for our sake, at least, we have strats that we are convinced. We could be wrong, obviously, because no one can predict the meta. But we're convinced that they will have.
There's small things that you can do, like for example, VK on the grad objective of the Kings. We have some guys that sit on the well and like they drop down depending on like how many players the warden calls out. There's small things you can do, but ultimately it's going to come down to like the defenders. How well can you defend like the one objective that you, and because you start off juggling, right? And then when one falls, you end up like having to hard guard one, and like you give everything you have to that one final objective you have. So there's two parts to it: how well can you juggle to begin with, and then how well can you like hard guard your last objective by pushing out the kiting if he can move. If not, how well can you like call out ninjas? Can you have one guy that doesn't like want to run out all the time on Tiger and actually stay on the cart? That's like a big thing. There's not many people want to like sit down for that long. Like I said, like, you can usually think these things through quite well and like come to a conclusion that how much strategy there is. And personally, I just don't think there's much available in Invasion.
Well, here's what I'll say then: is my job is a bit unique in the Mordhau scene in that I am literally not a player in any sense of the word. I just coach a team that has.
You?
Well, I just run events for NA. That's pretty much all I do, and then I help coach.
What about this NAEU thing? That was one of the main reasons I uploaded that video. Is just because if all this can like lead into something that's good or interesting, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's funny. I actually was debating bringing this up, but I'd like to run a 2v2 event in EU just to see if anybody's actually interested in that sort of thing, because you had mentioned like people just want to play to have fun and they don't really care about the incentives, aka prize pools, etc.
No, they okay. they do want to have prize pools, otherwise you might not see interest. Like for example, you asked me why do people not play the duel tournament?
Right.
Like why would you want to play 20 duels in a row for nothing, right? Like we had a duel tournament quite recently. It's not, but most people don't really like duels. And
what format does EU prefer, though?
I realize it sounds like hypocritical as I was saying like NA should have been playing and winning. If you're in a tournament, if you register for a tournament, I think you should see it through to the end. You shouldn't be forfeiting games, even if you've already got to your incentive. Like you got the good thing you wanted, and now there's nothing left. I think you should still carry on playing, just because like, why wouldn't you? But I don't think that means someone can just walk and say I'm hosting a tournament, and every comp player needs to like rush over and sign up and play in it. Then I think even a small cash prize would show that you're first of all serious. I'm not saying you're not serious, but to people that don't know you, having a cash prize shows that like you're putting something up.
Correct.
Not just their time. Because we had a guy in the forums right at the start. Was like, I'm hosting a worldwide tournament. We're going to be doing a 24-hour event all across all regions. It's going to be duels. We don't know if it's going to be first to 10 yet. And I was like, this isn't happening. Like, no one knows who you are. You obviously haven't organized anything in your life. There's no cash prize, so you're obviously not that serious about it. And he was like, fuck you, buddy. I'm trying to do something good for the scene. I'm trying to be.
Yeah, I actually have spoken to that guy. The difference being, I think, that I have stuff I can point to in any that I actually have done. So
yeah, for sure. So you've obviously got like some.
Yeah,
some
I ran.
already.
I doubt you've heard of it, but I ran a thing called the Mordhau Community League. It was a 5-week league that I ran that was 5v5 skirmish, and there were 24 teams in it. And it was not a prize pool thing, but it was just like a 5v5 showcase league, and that was really fun for a lot of people. And then recently I did a 2v2 with like a $200 prize pool, so it wasn't anything insane, but it was just like a for fun 2v2.
Yeah, even that would be like incentive for a lot of people to join up, I think.
But the whole thing I basically did was just like, okay, any donations I receive between like the time registration opens and the end of the tourney will go directly to the players, and it's split 60,
Oh,
30,
that's
10.
awesome.
And that was a fun thing where my goal would be to encourage more people to just run events who have reach, because they're really not that hard to manage at the end of the day. The difficulty is having the manpower, not the brain power. So it's like, when it comes down to running a 2v2, all you really need to do is figure out how to be literate on like a website that does bracket management and that has some sort of a stream overlay. They make the stream overlay for you, so that it automatically shows like
And
who's
then you
at
just
what
need
placement.
someone to stream it as well.
Right, you need someone to stream it, and then if you have it appropriately large enough, you need to run matches concurrently at the beginning, so you need referees to help you do that. But aside from that, the actual process of doing it does not require like some big brain high IQ, and it's like I had no event management experience before, and people took a chance on the fact that I wasn't going to be an idiot running a thing, and they joined my league, and that was a big thing because it gave me a chance to gain the experience I needed to actually not fuck it up as badly in the future. And I don't know, I feel like the chance for the community to help the scene grow and potentially branch away from just Invasion being the only option for competitive play that exists, because I know Invasion is a divisive topic. It's not one of those things where everybody really
We all like playing it.
head over.
It's obviously a nice change.
Yeah. Well, how many people is everybody? Like when we say we all like playing it, is it all
Well,
of BK or all of the
obviously,
EU scene?
No,
or?
there's something. Banter boys don't particularly like BB. Sorry, they don't particularly like Invasion, but I don't think they also particularly like the game either. So it's hard to tell how much of it's Invasion, how much of it's the game. I'm not sure if there's any team out there that directly prefers Skirmish. I like Skirmish. I think I prefer large team Invasion compared to large team Skirmish, though, just because there's more opportunities if you like find a smaller fight than just like some big chaotic team fight.
Right.
So if you came through with like I'm hosting a 2v2, even if it's just I don't know like $50, people would sign up for that for sure. At least I would. I don't know if anyone else would.
And also, the thing that would be big in doing something like that, I guess this is getting a bit more concrete, but if even you signed up, just because people have respect for your position in the scene, instantly it has more interest to them. If they're like, yes, it's $50, but Stouty's in it, so it must be cool. Or like, the second any good player who has a following gets in on an event like that, it suddenly becomes more interesting. So, I know with the 2v2 tourney I did, all the players that signed up first were players that probably nobody really recognized because they hadn't made a name for themselves. But as the size of the tourney grew, and the prize pool was growing, because remember, it grew over time as we got closer because it was based off donations, people got more and more interested. So like towards the end of the registration, we had much better teams signing up. So we had like Blonde and Ren and Mac Daddy and Cyclone and Kronk and Mossberg and teams like that were like, okay, well, now that it's actually getting significant, it's one of those things where it kind of, because the prize pool was dynamic, the people signing up also was dynamic, you know?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And also, one of the things, somebody suggested this last minute, basically I left the donations to the prize pool open while the tourney was happening, so like if there was like a big upset, it got more hype, because the people were like, oh shit, so-and-so has a chance, I'll fucking throw in. It's like adding money to the pot in like a poker tournament almost, except in Mordhau. And it became kind of just a fun weekend community event that happened, and then a lot of people were like, hey, it was fun. I made some mistakes along the way. A couple people got, or a team got DQ'd that shouldn't have been, but I know why it happened and why it shouldn't happen again. So it's like, again, I learned experience from that about, okay, here's what not to do.
Well, that's one of the reasons I didn't play the duel tournament as well, because they DQ'd Bruno for no reason. They thought he was cheating or something.
Oh goodness, I didn't even know that. But
he's one of the best duelists, so there's no reason like playing a tournament when some people just being like thrown out. Also, shields hadn't been nerfed at that time, so it would just be a shield winning probably.
Somebody in my chat already said, yeah, I'll pitch in $50 to play that tournament. So, I mean, people are obviously like interested. I don't know. Basically, what would need to happen if we did like a little TV2 for fun event, it'd probably be, so I did 48 teams in NA. That was a huge mistake. It's too big. I tried to do it in 2 nights, and it was just like obnoxious because it came down to there were 95 matches that needed to be played in 48 hours.
Yeah, it's too much commitment.
But if you make it smaller, like I think
16?
Yeah, either 16, yeah, probably for EU to start, just make it 16 and make sure that the people that would be the most exciting to watch are in it. And then demand goes up in the future, which means prize pools goes up, and then you can get more serious about it from there. But part of what I like about running stuff myself, instead of doing it through my Venatus like ties or whatever, is that there's not this level of professionalism. So sometimes you can do like a tri-cast where everybody's like having fun and just chilling, instead of it being like, okay, you've got to say stuff that's intelligent and represent the community well and all this. I don't know, it's like, it was one of the few times where I've had fun with the game in a while. It was just like taking a more laid-back approach to...
Yeah, I definitely remember like the first EU tournament I was in. It was like a dual tournament. Yeah, it was very much like, we had like 10 guys in TeamSpeak. It was very entertaining. No one was too worried about like He's not staying on topic or anything.
If you have any interest in me setting up a 2v2 tourney for EU, assuming there's a prize pool that would make it like interesting to people, I'll do it. I just need to know from like players.
Yeah,
that
I'll
would
definitely
actually...
be down for that.
Okay. Well, that's cool. The last thing I wanted to kind of move on from the whole thing, because that's not really your forte. The last thing I want to talk about though is you mentioned you had a Gold Rush doc. I guess I should pull it up and look at it because
I think I'll
I'm
link
curious.
it to you.
Yeah, I see that.
You don't need to do it now. It's like quite a lot to it, but.
Well, I was curious what your thought process was when you went about creating it. Like, where was it coming from?
So,
I guess.
Well, basically, I always thought someone would come up with a mode, and then, ideally the devs would have done it. But the time went on, no one came up with a mode. So I was like, okay, how would you make a melee mode, like a comp mode? And then I thought, what objectives were good in Shiv? And the best objective that came to my mind, and I think most people would agree with, was the Dark Forest objective, where it had 3 separate kings' families to attack. And that's more in line with like CS as well, which I think our game probably is in the closest, most resembles CS in terms of like what other competitive like ranked games are out there.
Sure.
It's first person, it's small team based. It's more esports than fighting games.
Yeah, it's interesting to me though, because my background is more actually in Overwatch, and I saw a lot of similarities for specifically when there's a payload or like a capture point or that sort of thing. I see a lot of
Personally,
parallels
I think we
between.
should avoid that. That's part of the reason why I think Invasion isn't great. It's like
Okay.
it's long, drawn out, single games where I think round based is better, and economy as well adds so much to it.
I actually think an economy would be really cool for. Is that in your mode where people can like buy weapons
I've got
and stuff?
Economy.
Oh, that's wild.
I mean, initially I thought. First of all, I moved away from killing peasants because that was the king's family objective in Shiv, to kill like the guys inside the cave. Now I've decided to put gold in the cave, and you take that gold back to the spawn. So one thing
so
that
it's a
does
literal
is,
economy.
Yeah. Well, at first I was like, the whole team has a shared pot of gold, but I thought that's too open to like people griefing, like spending all their gold in their own guy, and like no one else gets any. So now, like when you get a gold back, everyone on their team gets like 200 gold for the next round.
Is the gold only from the pot of gold, or is it also like incentivizing kills and good play and that sort of thing?
Yeah. So if you get a kill, that's also another thing. So everyone gets 100 gold on kill, but the defenders.
Everyone meaning the whole team? Everyone, or just the person who got the kill?
Everyone in the game.
Wait. So when you get a kill, does your whole team get 100 gold, or do you get 100 gold?
No, just you.
Okay. So when you say everyone, you mean every person. Got it.
Yeah, and because I don't want to. One of the cheese strats, right? If you've got no respawn, so if you do have spawns on the defense, and the same for invasion, it's like you run out all the time. You like force fights and make them have to go through 2 team fights. So if you die as a defender, you lose 100 gold. So that's something to like.
Oh, interesting.
One way to attack or prevent people doing that too much, or like punish it if it goes wrong at least. What else do we have? Yeah, so you don't have to kill the peasants and stuff. You actually have to take gold back to your spawn. So that gives the defenders enough time to like, if they died on one point defending it and they failed to defend it, now they have to get the gold back to the spawn. So they've got time to spawn and regroup, and like both teams like ready to like go for the second phase of this round. So
I see.
It's not like a complete stomp. Like you can't just wipe the team and then do all the objectives quickly. Like you have to actually spend time.
So it sounds like what you kind of want is, if I'm understanding this right, this is entirely rounds based, correct?
Yep.
So it's kind of like skirmish in that way, except one team has respawns and and the other team that does not is trying to make as much progress as possible per round.
Yeah, that's the only way you can have this kind of style of game mode, is if the defenders have some huge
advantage.
Yeah, something to keep it so they can't just get rushed every time, because the CS mode wouldn't work in this game.
Yeah. So then. Okay. And what would be your reason for doing that, as opposed to... No, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm not trying to...
No, go for it. It's fine.
What would be the reason for doing that instead of having, like, skirmish with a capture point and that's it?
Because that's just a straight team fight, and that's just essentially what skirmish is right now. What I'm trying to do is avoid just game modes that end up being a straight team fight. So if we had a CS mode that was exactly a clone of CS, what the defenders would do is they can't defend both points, so they stack their team on one, and if the attackers attack that point, it's a team fight. If the attackers attack the other point, you just rotate, have a team fight, and then defuse. So that wouldn't work. That's just a straight team fight, and you might as well just play skirmish.
Right.
So you want to have something that incentivizes teams to like split up, and you get team fights as well, but there needs to be something else. You can't just be pure team fight.
And we want to avoid... So maybe I'm missing something here, but what's so bad about pure team fights specifically?
What's a skirmish then?
Okay, but what was wrong with like?
Nothing's wrong with skirmish. There's a lot of depth to melee team fights, but you know, would you watch Counter Strike if all it was 5v5 aim map?
Well,
There's
no,
not
but
much
I also
strategy to
think
it,
the
it's
combat
just
in
melee skill.
CS:GO is very, very simple compared to the combat in Mordhau, so team fights are more interesting. However, I do agree with a separate argument, which kind of backs up your point, which is that
I
while
agree.
they are more
Just quickly,
interesting,
I think if you combine this interesting team fight with actual strategy, like you say, a team and you say like a good team with strategy on invasion can like outplay melee. I don't think that's the case in invasion. I really don't. Whereas with this mode, I'm hoping like teams with strategy could actually indeed be like
okay. And the thing I do agree
more
with
than some of their parts.
is like in the case of team fights specifically, while they are more interesting to the players, I actually think they are less interesting to the spectators in a lot of cases.
100%.
So I
Yeah,
do agree with
exactly.
that
So if you have like an
that side of
objective
it.
as well, that makes it a lot more. Exactly. So if you get a kill like in skirmish, it's like you got a kill. But if you get a kill defending like the last point when your team is like down and you've
Yeah.
got no reason, like that suddenly
It's
has
like
a lot more context and height to it.
people can
Yeah.
follow the storyline more than they can follow the combat
Yeah.
nuance. So if you have
There's
some
just
guy
more
who's like
scenarios and it's more
right.
exciting.
So if somebody's in a 1v2 in skirmish, it's like an arbitrary 1v2, but if they have a 1v2 where they're defending the pot of gold that everybody
Yeah,
understands
and
is
it's just a
valuable, and
round
then
point or something.
they're like
Yeah.
on 1 HP and then they take someone down and they die valiantly, then it's like a hero moment that people can remember, right? Because there was like
Yeah.
there was an incentive behind it. So I get that. In your mode, would there ever be room for team fights, or is it just like
Oh, there'll be
split
team fights all the
objectives?
time. So for example, like let's say there's many scenarios where it could happen. But let's say that the attacking team's doing really well. They've cleared 2 caves. There's only 1 cave left. That's going to be a team fight, but it might not even be a team fight. It might be like 2 team fights. It might be like an invasion scenario. But the point is like, so in invasion that's a guarantee, whereas in this mode it's like it might happen, but it's not guaranteed to happen. And if it does happen, it's like it's going to be only a very good attacking team's ever going to have the opportunity to do it. So it means like, because most teams in invasion against a good team, they're going to get stumped at some point. Whereas in this mode, you can make progress, and you're never going to get stumped. Like you can like you get some gold for the next round, you get some points. It's never going to be like a DNF, if that makes sense.
Right.
It's always going to be like everyone should be able to get a first cave with like a 5-man rush, and there's only 2 people guarding it. Like most teams should be able to do that.
Gotcha. So then, my last question. Somebody in my chat mentioned, they said nothing has beat for them. Winning a 1v3 in skirmish is like a holy shit, that's a highlight moment. So what would you see as being the optimal like hero moment in your mode
Yeah, it's the
specifically?
same thing. Any 1vx is hype, but it's going to be even more hype.
Because there's
with,
like
other
incentives
stuff
behind
going
it?
on. Yeah.
Gotcha. So then,
Because the thing is, like, it's really hard to explain if you've never experienced it. But the first time you get in Dark Forest, right? You do then your objectives. You push a cart, and you get a sluice gate, which is a really hard objective. And then like that opens up, and then you got the King's family, and like everything opens up now. It's like a whole bunch of strats. Like it almost feels like you got like freedom to like try new things, and I really like that freedom. And it's just something I feel is missing from this game.
gotcha.
And it just lets your mind like wander and do more exciting stuff, and just like run it. It's like run 2 teams at each other over and over again in skirmish.
And on the more pragmatic side of things, now that we have this like really cool game mode we thought up, or I say we, that you've thought up.
Like he's taking the credit already, boys.
Sorry.
Right
What I meant was, what path do you see forward for the competitive scene? Do you think we just play Invasion until the devs do Gold Rush and we just pray that somebody has an off day where they're like, okay, I'll do
Well, I
this
mean,
much for you?
I'm trying to get Crash to read that shit's impossible, but what I've done is someone's actually made Dust 2. So
I've seen
I was
that.
thinking,
Yeah, I played on that
Yeah.
briefly.
so I've asked him if like it's possible for him to like make a couple adjustments and sort of have like some kind of map we can prototype this on. And then what I'll do is I'll get 9 other people that are eager and like ready to like try new shit out. And then
Oh, I thought you meant Ager when you said Eager.
yeah, Ager might be one for me. He's like one of the most die-hard comp guys.
I
so
heard
definitely.
9 other people that are Ager, and I was like, wait.
Yeah, honestly, if I could get 9 Agers for this, that'd be perfect because that's exactly the kind of guy I need. Just someone that's like really ready to test things, strategize, and then we'll play it on team deathmatch. So the attackers, if they die, they spec, and then the defenders can play as normal.
Oh, I see.
And obviously there won't be an economy, but you can sort of get the general idea. I'll record
You
that.
could have people use
Send
loadouts
it
that
to
are
the
economy
devs and
based
just
or
hope for
something.
the
I don't
best,
know.
and they kind of like share like this is a good idea. And if it fails, obviously like it fails, but hopefully, I that's the most interesting mode. Like, if someone comes up for better modes, sure, go for it. The only other mode someone's came up with is Wizardish Protect the King. And as we've seen from Grad, I don't think that's the most interesting objective. It just leads to like kiting,
Yeah.
toolbox cheese, just like lame, no real strats, just like running away.
One actually thing that Fatoria did that I actually like for competitive play as far as design philosophy goes is on the final objective. I don't know how much you played at Fatoria, but there's this character. He's got like a plume and an Exi sword, but
Yeah,
he's
I played him.
stupidly broken.
Yeah,
But he's not part of the
146
objective.
kills. with him.
Yeah, he's stupidly broken, but he's not. He's not part of the objective, and I thought that was kind of cool because let's say there's one peasant, right? That is left, or maybe two or something like that on the final objective. It'd have to be an objective that's more beefy than a peasant, I think, for this to work well. Like, not something just gets one shot. But if you had a moment where maybe there's an objective that takes like 3 or 4 seconds, no, like 5 seconds of uninterrupted interaction to like neutralize. I don't know if that means killing it or just holding a button or whatever the prompt would be, but I'm saying something that takes some amount of time. It'd be cool to have a moment where you have this like beefy character that is able to like 1v6 for some length of time while his team gets there and that sort of thing, because it's like, even though it can feel like cheese to the players, that does lots for the spectators, because there is no game esports related where you have asymmetrical warfare that's really mainstream like that. So that's one of the objectives that I thought was really interesting to think about.
I don't like it because it discredits actual 1vx's.
Well, yes, it discredits actual 1vx's, but those would just be even more hype as a result. I'm saying like a 1v2 with a normal dude, in my opinion, would not be discredited by a 1v6
that's one
with
way
a
to
boss
like
character.
deal with defenders being split up, is like give them like a beefy character to like somehow 1vx with. But if that's like your 1vx solution, it's just like make one guy just broken the OP. I think that's really bad.
No, I agree that it's OP, but it's almost like,
it's fun for pubs. I don't think it belongs in comp.
sure. I'm always trying to think like, when can asymmetrical warfare be used in a competitive environment? It hasn't been done well before, and I don't know if that's proof that it's impossible or just proof that it's not been done correctly.
Gold Rush would be quite asymmetrical. I mean, isn't CS asymmetrical? You got
well, yes, but when I say
attack, it's very different.
When I say asymmetrical, I mean asymmetrical in like the formatting of the teams themselves. So Mordhau is not a great example of that, but games that have done it that I'm talking about specifically is like, I don't know if you've ever heard of Evolve, but it was like a beast hunting game where you had one player that was like this super overpowered monster, and then 4 players that were like, it was basically like Dark Souls but with guns, and there's a player controlling the boss. Yeah. It was like an interesting thing, and it flopped because it wasn't done well, unfortunately. But I've always thought like, chances for that, right? Yeah, it's very difficult, but chances for that to happen in competitive environments, even though they can feel like cheese, they are one of the most spectacled things you can put in games. So anytime you have a chance to incorporate that, I always see it as interesting. But for this, I think it's probably a pipe dream. But I guess
I'd avoid it just because, like,
yeah.
You know the formula for successful comp games. We should just try and follow that as much as possible with this genre, and then.
It also got off topic though, because what I was trying to say is do we have a solution to get a game mode like yours into the game besides just praying for the lords above to bless us with good game
modes?
It's
up to the devs. The devs control everything. This is for every game basically. So do the devs want to do it? If so, you're good. If not, they don't, and it doesn't happen. I mean, the only way it could happen otherwise is like some insane modder comes up with like a functioning mode, and then everyone's playing it, and then like, the devs is like so easy for them just to press a button and have it. Like if it's on their plate, then devs should probably start doing it. But
it's like,
personally, I think something like this would need an idea, and like I said, I'm gonna do team deathmatch runs with it, and then maybe like if they think it's cool. But the thing is, like, they might not even want to do comp at all, so maybe they think it's not worth doing. Maybe they think it's not worth the risk.
One of the things that I've thought about is, while I'm against using comp mod for the competitive, I'm not against using comp game modes for the competitive, and here's why. It's much easier to learn a new game mode than it is to learn a new combat system.
Yeah, I fully agree.
So for me, I think if I need to play around with the USDK. So you don't know this, but you don't have any reason to. But I actually am a student studying game development at the University of Utah.
Oh, I knew that. I knew everything about you, and your first name and second name. No, I don't. Yeah.
Anyway, once I find time, I'd like to play around with Unreal a bit to see if it's easy to add new game modes. Because assuming the blueprints are there for the current things, like if there's a blueprint for the capture point, for example, where I can just drag and drop it in as an asset. Level design on the dragging and dropping side is just creativity. It's not technical skill. So creating the blueprints, I think, is the biggest barrier to entry. But I'm convinced that people will be able, based on what I've seen so far, like I've already seen people come up with custom objectives where there was one where it was like, pick up your banner and carry it to the thing to like stake your claim on the objective, and that was like a custom invasion blueprint that somebody came up with. And I'm convinced you could probably do something like what you're talking about without too much difficulty.
The hardest thing would be like a fully functioning economy that would need UI as well.
Yeah, well, I actually bet you that specifically Spook, who does the UI, might be able to help with that. I don't know what the
for sure.
What
that's what I'm saying. I think I would need the devs in some
Right, but it
guide her
doesn't
to
like.
get this.
I think it's easier to ask some of the devs as opposed
Yeah,
to
yeah.
all of them to do certain things, especially if you already have a product and you're like, hey, I have the economy blueprint done. Can you make something that looks pretty to click on? And then it's like, okay,
Oh,
well,
that'd be cool.
this
Yeah.
benefits me to do because it's making my
Yeah.
game a better product, so it's not like a waste of their time, right? I don't know. I'd be interested in exploring ways to get different game modes into the game because that's actually what I would like to see from the modding community is new maps and new modes and leave the combat to the devs because in my opinion, I think you've even said this, the combat system is pretty solid, all things considered, like on the
Yeah.
spectrum of combat systems that exist in games. And I would say it's actually it's the shining accomplishment of this game. I actually think where
There's
this game
nothing to play.
falters,
I agree.
yeah, I think where this game falters is the modes and the maps, personally, not the combat. I think if the maps and modes were phenomenal, people would forgive the combat a lot easier, even in its current state. So if there comes a point where we're able to create good content, right, for the competitive scene where it's just mod.io supported in, and it just you join the map and that's it, that could have serious impact on the scene because it's easily accessible modded comp, but I mean, it's taking work off the plate of the devs or giving it to them depending on how you look at it. But I say it's taking work off, and then it adds new things for people to do, which generates content. And it's just like a win-win-win. But again, you mentioned some god modder has to come in and like do it, but I'm gonna need to explore it, I think, because I don't think it's as impossible as it's been made out to be to have.
I'm sure it's not impossible. It's just like I personally, I wouldn't know where to start, and I would
Right.
feel uncomfortable. Like I don't know if anyone, like there's some people that make good mods, but they're probably not interested in comp. Like I know one guy already said like, yeah, fuck comp, don't care. So I wonder.
I
how
wonder
many
if there's a
people, like, good
way.
modders and do care passionately about comp, like actually make something for it.
Well, you could have. So in this game, there's no division, but in a lot of games, the competitive scene is very different from the dedicated, not pro scene, but like the hardcore diehards. So like you could be a player in Overwatch who's like low diamond, and you're still a comp player. You're just not like flying out to LANs and playing in tournaments, right? But you're still a part of the scene.
Yeah, I was just saying like in popular games, everyone is a comp player. They play
Right,
ranked,
exactly. So that's what I was saying
that's what I think that's what you need for a game to survive. Is like
right. So if you were able to have
someone invested to like improving.
right. So if you were able to have like a game mode, so picture this, right? Let's say some god modder does what you asked, and they come up with this mode, or like a prototype of it, and they publish it, and then you can host it on a server, and all you have to do is join the server, and then Mod.io installs it for you, and you just play. Because I've already played
Yeah,
Sword Game, and that
awesome.
worked. What if there were servers that were set up that were like max 12 slot, just like pub servers, but they featured like a prototype comp mode? I wonder if that would ever catch on. If people would play, if pub players would play a competitively formatted game, but not like on a team, on a roster type thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think they'll definitely be interested in it. I think it mainly come from like people that are already on teams, not necessarily the best teams, but like I could see like some mid-tier
Right.
teams wanting to try it out for sure.
But
Yeah.
I'm saying, would
But someone's
players who aren't
completely
on
new.
teams?
Well, I'm not sure if those players would ever even like go into the server browser, let alone.
Well, if you made a
Join
simple
random
post on
servers.
Reddit, all the normies would see it instantly. I mean,
Maybe it's not out of the world, but I don't think that'd be like the main audience.
okay, but I guess the whole argument has always been like the reason this comp scene suffers is because of the lack of casual players that are interested in it. But if the casual players can easily play the format for the competitive mode, even if it's
Yeah, but,
community
like,
run, it makes it a lot more
I
interesting.
think
For
the
them
only
to
way
watch.
for that to happen is if it's on the main menu and it's like already polished. I
Uh,
don't think like these kind of players would ever want to play something that's like
well, I mean, how often do you
going
play
to-
like pubs?
it's pretty much all you can do if you're not doing that duels.
Right. So, what I've noticed is that the average player skill by a lot of these guys has been improving over the course of however long. And I'm convinced it's because they probably watch like videos on it, like videos you've produced or videos that other players have produced, and they see, or they go to dual servers and they get their ass kicked, and they're interested in improving because the average skill has improved a lot. So
Yeah.
my logic.
I don't know what goes on in their head. I don't know if they're interested in like trying out this new thing that they need to go looking for.
Well, haven't people
Potentially.
been saying forever like 3v3 ranked would save the game or something
Yeah, but
along
aren't
those
these
lines?
mostly comp players already?
I don't know.
Like some
I
people that are
know
invested in comp.
I know a lot of my friends who didn't really play the game were like, man, if there was a good ranked mode, I would come back. Just it
Yeah.
felt like kind
Well, I
of
mean,
pointless
those
to
people
play.
are easy to hop on. I think you have one guy like shepherds people servers, but I'm not sure if you could hope that they join. I mean, if they played once with like a friend, let's say you talk to your friend into trying it out once, I could see that friend like going back and trying to get a new lobby going because he's like he's hooked in now, like
Right.
he needs more of it.
I know.
That could happen.
I don't know. I feel like if there was a competitive mode that was borderline accessible to normal players because it didn't require you to be on a team to play it, that could be a pretty interesting bolster to the, I don't know. It gives me something to think about, I guess, if that's going to be something that's possible. I could talk to some of the... I don't know how active the EU modding scene is. Like, I don't know who's in that. I know Giru does stuff in it for, like, the comp mod and stuff, but I know there have been a couple mods from NA that have come out that were pretty... Actually, I don't even know who made it, but there's, like, a sword game mod. I don't know if you've played it, but it's, like...
Awesome. I haven't played it yet. I want to play it.
Yeah, there's a couple servers in NA that host it, but it was, like, really, really polished, and I was really surprised. Like, every time you get a kill, it just instantly works perfectly. No glitches, no nothing. The UI works well. I was like, damn. Yeah. This is cool. And then there's stuff like if you get a kill with your fists, it like demotes you and things like that. That showed me how easy it was to just log in and play the mod. Like I didn't have to even download a link anywhere. It was just you fucking click on the server and it works.
To do like 5v5 comp, you need like 5 people on your team that are gonna be communicating. Like to have a good experience with it. Not necessarily. I mean, if you want to be like pub star, but these things are played better with like teamwork, strategy.
Well, it's like I know with,
for example, on defense, you can't be like. You can't just wander off and do your... I mean, you can, but you won't be very effective. You need, like, some people to, like, go places. Like, do you ever play ranked CS and, like, you just mute your mic and don't listen to anyone? Like, you're probably not going to be doing, like, the best job.
Sure, but it's still playable, I think.
Yeah, it's still playable, yeah.
I don't know. I feel like this game could benefit a lot from a competitively directed mode that is somewhat easy to access. As long as it's as simple as, like... clicking a server and it just works and you don't have to go download anything. The second there's like an external download link, you're toast. That's not going to work. That's why comp mod is...
Yeah, that's definitely one way the comp scene takes off is like someone does make that and then like it kind of takes a very organic approach to it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, Warcraft 3 and Dota or whatever.
Obviously, it would be up to the scene ultimately to do it, but a game that comes to mind...
Yeah, so for that example, it's like 100% the scene and then another example could be like...
Well, also, if that worked and it caught on, then the devs... Yeah. Like, if there was actually like players that were like...
That's way more like overall commitment from the scene to actually get it fully functioning, whereas the way I'd go about it would be like, devs, please make this.
Right. I don't know. I'm the kind of person who's not content to just wait for the devs to do things. Not to sound all like...
We need people like you then, yeah.
Well, I hate that it sounds so noble, because I feel like that should be more of the norm than it is. Like, I don't think I should be some unique person in that. It should be like... Okay, I really enjoy this game.
Fair, like when we funded the Kickstarter, lots of us were from the comp scene, so we felt like we're trusting these guys to do us right.
Sure, sure.
So we kind of expect a comp mode. Like I feel like entitled to a comp mode, especially since in the reach goal was like they said 3v3 ranked. All right, that'd be very boring, but we haven't even seen that. So
correct.
I feel like we need some kind, not even just for us, but for the game's health. Like
and not to be that guy, but didn't they promise an SDK?
Yeah, but that's coming.
Are you sure?
That's gonna take a while to do.
Yeah, but part of what bothered me. So keep in mind, the way I got into the Mordhau is 3 days before it came out. I saw an ad for a medieval game that looked kind of cool looking. I was like, okay, I'll buy it and try it out. That was literally it. I knew nothing about this game before that, so I had no expectations. But I was like, a multiplayer medieval game. I haven't seen one of those in like, can't remember the last time. So I came in and I was literally like a frontline noob pub stomper, not even pub stomper, just a pub stompy, I guess, for like a month. And then eventually I was like, okay, well, this is kind of cool, and I feel like I'm getting better at these like frontline matches. Maybe I'll see if there are other players that are like better than me so I can play against. And then I went into a pickup game, which they used to exist in AA. Now they're not really a thing, but
yeah,
at the time they existed, and I was like, wow, this guy just... I went 7-29 my first pug, which was like 8v8 frontline or something like that. I was like, wow, that's
It's probably like really memorable.
Yeah. I remember the match very clearly. I remember
first, like scrim.
Yeah, I remember the players who were in it and how well they did and that sort of thing. It's just like I would have liked that no longer exists anymore. On top of the fact that there's no mode that's like comp focused. I don't know. I wish that. I think there are things the players could do to help push the scene forward, but refuse to because they don't think it's their place to, or they shouldn't have to. But I'm to the point now where I'm like, okay, well, I think it's kind of redundant to think about what we should have to do to save the scene, and it's more beneficial to look at what we could do. So it comes down to like thinking outside of... Yeah, I'm not pointing the finger at anybody in particular. I'm just saying like it starts even with like the general elitism of players at the top of the scene just across the board, where your average person...
Well, I think the first thing was like the obvious thing, and it seems easy to do, but no one really did it. Is like, what's a good mode? What would be good? And it's quite easy to like flesh out something that works in your head.
Mhm.
And like could produce interesting strategies. So I think that was the first obstacle. Like no one, because a lot of people just said just make CS, but just CS wouldn't work. So I kind of like took that idea and ran with it. And now
Right.
it's like this is actually the hard part. Is like how do you fucking make this?
Right. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's also like things like if a player. So I had a moment a couple days ago where I realized just how fucked the scene is. There was a comp player who joined the Mordhau competitive group's Discord because he saw it on the home screen of the game. As if, are you interested in competitive play? Join this Discord. And he joined,
Yeah.
and he was in the general chat. He's like, so I heard this was for comp. What should I do next? And then he was instantly assaulted by toxic shit posters who just ruined his day, and he just left. And it was like,
Oh no.
okay, well, clearly we've closed off any chance of new players getting into the scene just because of the people in it at the very
Yeah, I don't
beginning.
think you can ever. Here's the mistake: we can't like expect people to like go looking for it. It needs to be there. Just to
Well,
click a
even if it's on
button
the
and
home
play it.
screen, when they find it, it's still not there. It's just a bunch
Well,
of
no,
toxic assholes.
well, no, because like you still were expected to go looking in Discord and then like find people to like. No, that can't be it. It needs to be like matchmaking.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think it could be as simple as this is why like pub comp servers, if that makes sense, would be such an
Yeah,
interesting thing.
that's one way.
Because even if it's not matchmaking, which I understand that's
As long
probably a
as you can
stretch
play
to ask from the
mode,
devs.
mode
Yeah,
can be,
it's like if it's on Reddit and everybody's aware peripherally, like, oh well, there are comp servers that exist. I
Well,
guess
let's
if you
say we
want to
get
try
the
it.
map going, right? Let's say like when we get the map and then we play team deathmatch on that, and even just playing like this really fucking early version of this on team deathmatch with no economy and like regen still in the game and yeah, like all that could still be really fun and people would be like, hey, let's do that again, and then maybe someone mixes server with that map and it's on team deathmatch and people just do that.
Yeah.
So that could be like really easy to do.
Yeah.
It might require people to like follow rule sets and hope everyone like obeys them. For example, let's say people agree not to run out until they've waited
Sure.
20 seconds. Like it would require these kind of things, but that's definitely like an early way it could happen without some god modder.
I also find it deeply ironic that you referenced Dust 2 specifically as a map because that would imply you have two games that are entirely different running on the same map that both use it
It's
for their
just like a
competitive
really
scene.
good map, I think.
Right, but it's like I don't think there's ever been a map in gaming history that has been used in two entirely different games as this pretty much the same map for different game modes,
It gets
etc.
modded into like every game, but if it did become like the map to play, that would be very funny. But yeah,
It would be ironic too because I'm pretty sure that's copyright material. Like if
I
you
don't think
really
so
run it
because I
up the line.
think someone's modding Dark Forest 2, and I think someone asked if it's copyright, and they said no. So
Well,
we'll see.
I suspect that Valve would have done a
But
better
yeah,
job with their copyrights than Torn Banner. But
how could you? Well, you don't make it dusty for one, and then it's like, could you copyright different pathways and like?
in
Oh, no,
game design,
I don't-
it's getting there. Yeah, you can copyright. I know this is probably not something you care about at all, but you can copyright map
No, it's
layouts, and there's
interesting.
a significant feature that's like standoutish.
No, I don't think you could copyright like an alley that then like if
No,
your
not an
alleyways
alley.
were
I'm saying
yeah,
if it's very clearly there's like a point of no return though, as far as copywriting maps goes. It's like if you use a part of it, obviously that's different. But if it's literally like a recreation of the map that's just retextured, there comes a point where the judge
I
will
mean, every
actually say,
MOBA's
like,
got 3 lanes, and you couldn't like copyright a fucking MOBA map, could you?
well, it's also because the MOBA game mode is intrinsic to the map. Like the gameplay is tied
Right, well, you
directly
can
to the
make-
map in the most core sense of
You
the.
can make the same argument with like, I don't know, but yeah, it's kind of off topic.
Well, specifically just to
doubt
wrap
I'd
up the
get to
point.
that. And the thing is, the map isn't old.
Yeah, yeah, and especially if
So
it's a
long as it has
modded
3
scene.
points and there's different avenues to go, like that's fine.
Yeah,
I
in
just
a
think
hypothetical
Dust 2's,
world,
like, really
in
good.
a hypothetical world where this takes off, you would never use maps from other games in the actual comp scene. That would be a thing. You'd have the devs create their own stuff after they see the potential of it. I don't know. I think what I want to do is find a way to generate fun in the scene, like new experiences that people haven't had, specifically the comp scene I'm talking about, that is also potentially available to new players. I don't think that has ever existed in Melee Slasher history, where you have a comp scene that somebody can jump in and try. Besides Pugs, in a competitive Discord. That's like it.
It's such a missed opportunity from the devs. I really don't understand. Like, I mean, like, obviously they had to release the game. I don't know if you know this, but the Kickstarter was like, the game was delayed for like a year, and obviously they're running out of money, so they had to release what they had. But imagine if like we had like 5v5 ranked at launch. Like, I feel like the game could be just way bigger than it currently is. Maybe I'm wrong because I also said like BR would be popular, but then it wasn't popular at all. So, but I feel like team-based games, right? They are the core of every successful esport, Twitch game, Steam game.
No, I agree. I agree. And there's
All
also
team-based.
I don't know if this is the path forward for Mordhau specifically because it'd be kind of an unfortunate outcome, but there are games that are highly competitive and have no place in esports. An example of that being a game like Rust. So Rust has a thriving competitive scene, but it's not esports style at all because matches last 2 weeks. So obviously it's not going to be esports. But it's like,
Oh no, you could do like deathmatch, right? So that's one way. If you just really like the gunplay.
yeah, but Rust, for those who haven't played it, it's more about the holistic experience than it is the
Right.
gunplay specifically. But my
But
point
you
is
could-
basically, it's like, yeah, you can esports a fight, but you can have a competitive scene that does not
Yeah, it wouldn't
involve
be like the Rust everyone else
esports.
knows, but it would be.
Right.
Well, Rust isn't a competitive game, so you couldn't expect to have an esport revolving around like 2 weeks of like raiding bases when people were
Right.
asleep. Like
Well,
that,
that's the
you know?
ironic thing, though, is like Rust. It is a very competitive game in the truest sense of competitive, but it's not an esports ready game, if that makes sense. So it's like, if you play it, you're a competitive player because you're playing to beat everyone else, but you're also
I mean,
not
it's
playing
like-
for like prize pools and tournament winnings and that sort of thing. So it's like,
It could go that way. If like Scary, isn't it? He's the mod or the dev. He could be like, we're holding a deathmatch tourney Rust, and then it's an esports game. It'd be that easy.
yeah, I suppose. But it's I guess,
it's really up to the devs. Like, do they want to do esports? Throw some money into it. It might take off.
yeah. I'm very curious though. I think I'm gonna talk to
More
people smarter than
importantly-
myself and see if I can throw together something like their mode in the SDK.
So important topic of all,
What's up?
NA versus EU.
Ah, yes, of course. I would love to talk about that. So, here's my I'm assuming you're talking about the land specifically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be like the hyper shit ever.
Yeah.
People would talk about that for years to come.
So, here is my philosophy about it. Is starting with the end of my league, I decided I'm going to consider the possibility of a LAN as seriously as I possibly can, so that if any opportunity pops up where it seems like it could lead to something potentially, I'm going to jump on it. And here's why that makes sense. It's because I think it is okay if I fail. And I'm okay
100%.
with the at least I tried mentality.
You know what I'm saying? I just want to play a LAN.
No, I know. But here's my point, though, is like, I think it is more reasonable than you might think if we look in the right places, because there are ways that a LAN specifically, regardless of the game, can offer a lot more publicity than sponsoring an online tournament or something like that for a
Isn't
sponsor.
esports in a bubble right now? Surely, like everyone's rushing for esports.
Yeah, no, I know.
You're seeing like run out like the time, like let's just make it esports.
So myself personally, I've worked with a few companies who have an interest in sponsoring esports events, and I've talked to this briefly about them, or I've bounced it off them basically. And some of them have the money to where they could throw it at this just to see if it makes a mark or not. Like,
The thing is, like, it would reach quite a few people, I think, because there's
yeah, I know. It'd be a
the
big
whole
thing
Shiv
too.
Community, yeah,
Yeah,
it would be hype, I think.
I think logistically, if it was going to happen, you'd need a couple things if we're talking about this seriously. Which most people, the second I bring it up, they're just like, "Get fucked, idiot! Never happened." I'm like, "Well, okay. Well, we're not going to get there with that mentality." I think a couple things that need to happen are: firstly, we need to figure out what a LAN could offer to people who invest in it. Right? So, is it like a fundraiser that they can then say, not a fundraiser, but like, can you raise funds alongside the costs of running the event, where it's then like it becomes a publicity stunt for a company where it's like, we supported gamers and we supported like some gaming related charity, right? So then it becomes
I see, yeah. So it's like two things at once.
right. So then you can kind of like, we can fucking support. I know it sounds like kind of gross to talk about charity so abstractly, but it's like when you can make good come out of a scenario, whether it be donations to charity or representing an organization trying to reach
Yeah, we
to
played,
people and that
like,
sort of thing.
The only money we saw in Shiv was in fact a charity tourney where like the winners pick where the money goes.
Right,
That
exactly.
was like,
So
the closest we came to like a prize pool. So,
even a LAN, like, at some point, I think people would have to accept, like, okay, I might not win money from this, but I got to play a fucking Mordhau LAN. It's kind of like its own prize, in a way.
I think I asked VK in the Discord channel, would you guys be like? I didn't say if there's a pretty big prize, but I just asked like, if the flight was paid for, would you go and do this? And pretty much everyone's like, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I've actually gotten a couple people who said, no, I have work. And I was like, okay, you coward. You're not going to take
What,
off
in
work
NA?
from Mordhau? Yeah, in NA.
I mean, like you can find NA players for sure. It's the hard part would be like flying out. No, fair enough. They'd have to fly out as well.
I think
could
the
see why
only
that-
way that it would reasonably work, so I actually mathed this out because I was curious what it would come out to. It comes out to around 25 to 30,000 US dollars to fly out and house and rent for the top 3 teams starting rosters from both regions. So like 3 EU teams, 3 NA teams. You might even have to do top 4, which would put it closer to the $30,000 mark. But
Yeah.
depending on how far ahead you plan, you can get flights for pretty cheap, assuming that players aren't like, I need first class flights because fuck you,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something like that.
Fuck that.
Otherwise, you could pay for your own flight if you want first class. That'd be the policy. But anyway.
I mean, you could even just do 2 teams, like.
Yeah, you could just do a
enough
literal
missing.
showcase match, but I feel like at some point you'd have to firstly have some sort of insanely high stakes qualifier where it's like, okay, only the first place team goes to the LAN, and then that's
Well, I mean, just pull the teams right now. For example, in EU is VK. Or, like,
right. But in NA,
well,
I know that-
it doesn't help that his team is fucking throwing forfeit there.
yeah, well, we wouldn't use this particular
Well,
qualifier to seed the.
Yeah, obviously, you'd have to do like another tournament.
Right. And probably if I was gonna do a LAN, I'd have to find a way to brand it correctly. But I actually think if people got behind the idea, there's a chance I could make it work. But it's right now I'd give it maybe a 25% chance of success. However, I refuse to discredit it as it'll never happen. I think that's a destructive mentality just from the get-go.
Like attitude.
Well, it's interesting. You're in the minority with that opinion, believe it or not. Most people are like, "Wow, you're a freak. Why would you ever think this would work?" Kind of like the whole thing you talked about with the dude on
I think the memory
forums.
of it and just what's going on here has found like some role players. No, getting in the king. I think the memory of it would be worth like any money potentially lost. That's like I'd put money towards just seeing that happen. That's just like something like that's lifetime. For me playing like a LAN would be like some lifetime shit.
Right.
Like insanely memorable. That's basically like my
the
dream
pinnacle
of this
of
game.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I was saying is like at whatever point, if I was able to facilitate a LAN, I could just be like, all right, I've done my parts. I see you guys.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, it seems like the LAN is like the unattainable holy grail.
Legend status for sure.
I wonder if that's actually true.
I would. Well, I don't know how everyone else would say it, but I'd say the guy's a fucking legend.
Yeah, I don't know. That'd be cool, but that's not ultimately why I'm doing this. I'm doing it to try and like grow the scene because since I do stream, ultimately I stand to benefit if people have any reason to watch my stream, whether it be he's that guy that did that thing or this guy's nuts, which is not the case. I'm pretty garbage at the game considering how many hours I put in, but that's why I found that I enjoy coming up, ironically enough, because I know we disagree on this, coming up with strategies for invasion and then facilitating events, because I'm one of the few people in NA that for whatever reason is able to take initiative on these things, because most people just can't be bothered, or they don't have time. That's also a very valid reason. Like some people work like time and a half each week, so they don't have time to just sit here and run an event, whereas I'm fortunate where I'm a part-time student that's got a break from college right now, so I can just invest a lot of time in this. I don't know. I think it'd be cool.
Nick's in chat, he says LAN is unrealistic, too early. Venatus already looked into it. No one right mind would pay for the things to flag the event.
Right, but that's kind of the mentality that I disagree with. Even though even though Nick and I are both Venatus, I still think we disagree on the.
Wait, so you're actually in Venatus? Or...
Yeah, I am. So I run.
Venatus. Isn't it Venatus? Like,
I don't know. I think it depends on.
I don't know.
I've heard skills call it Venatus and Venatus. I feel like.
Oh,
but,
okay. Yeah, okay, even he doesn't know.
But I completely forgot what my point was. But basically, yeah. So in Venatus or Venatus, sorry, I
can see where Nick's coming from.
am.
We don't have a proper mode, do we?
Correct, but maybe in a world where your mode gets made by a modding community of some sort,
that would be dope. But,
and we played it at LAN. Anyway, I know it's like a pipe dream, so it's too scary to think about.
To convince everyone that like it's a fun mode.
Well,
That's
right.
like
Obviously, if we were gonna do a LAN, it'd be minimum 6 or 7 months out, like at least. And I don't even know if the game will be alive.
Like, I'd say just do invasion because like, well, I mean, unless something crazy happens in the next 6 months, like, but I don't know.
Maybe we get a comp mode in the next 6 months. Who knows, dude?
Well, I mean, I speak to the devs about it, and like, it would just be skirmish. Probably. I mean, initially the ranked would be 3v3 skirmish, so maybe now they do 5v5 invasion. Like Spook's very in on invasion, or 6v6 invasion.
Yeah, he's been watching us play a lot because he's in A, so he watches a lot of the NA matches.
Yeah.
Spook's a cool dude. I don't like to play favorites, but I have never had a bad experience with Spook. And sometimes if I'm doing like viewer duels or stuff, he'll come hop on and duel us, and that's always fun.
That's awesome,
so, yeah. And he's actually quite good. I was surprised. Like for somebody who has to spend most of the time working on the game instead of playing it.
Yeah, unlike Crush, man. Crush is just bad at the game.
I've never played Crush, so I wouldn't know. But
I don't think he's here. I just trigger him. You're not here.
But yeah, I think if we were to set goals to make the scene better that the players can do that isn't up to the devs, despite how unreasonable they might be, just so there's like this is the path forward to fix the game in a perfect world, what do you think they would be? Actually, I'll give my pitch first, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I would say, firstly, some god out there would need to make a working prototype for a competitive mode that actually is like accessible to general players, and it has like Mordhau support and that sort of thing, so you can just log into a server and play it. I think that would need to happen first. And then if that does happen, you can do... you could have talks for running it in tournaments of some sort, whether it be showcase matches or that sort of thing, and then advertising on Reddit so it gains traction. And then if that were to happen, then potentially you could get more of a casual player base playing in a competitive context in this game, which could increase interest in the competitive scene. And then from there, you could eventually work towards marketing the game as having a competitive scene, and then ideally the devs would get on at some point along this pipeline, assuming it went well.
Personally, I think it'd be the other way around. So first of all, you get the mode, and then that's playable, and then like a bunch of casuals find it, and they the comp scene's playing it at the same time.
Right.
There's more casuals are playing it. They're like, all right, let's see what the top's like. And then like the comp scene goes from there, and then it kind of feeds into itself. But first, I think you need a bunch of casuals that are really into the mode.
Okay. I could help organize like pugs on a mode on my stream in an A, and you could probably do the same in EU if there was a way where, like, let's say somebody handed you.
Yeah, look, we need a mode, but it could either be like a god modder, or like somehow the devs get convinced. But that seems unlikely.
Here's my point though: is like, let's say right now I handed you the mode that you've created just perfectly, and I said, all right, you can have this mode, but you have to play it with your viewers on stream at least twice a week or something like that to generate like interest in it.
I mean, and there's nothing else to play. Of course, I play. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, all I do on stream these days is like play frontline until I get triggered at frontline, and then I do
It's just like
1v2s.
For me, we have Giru, who's fixing the combat, quote unquote, which I think is probably 30-40% of the issue, but the main issue, in my opinion, is the maps and modes.
I don't think it's combat. I don't think the combat's the issue at all. I
think I tend to agree with you.
really good.
I don't like discrediting what he's doing though, because I think it's good work. So
yeah,
I like just shitting on it and saying it's not valuable.
Like it's gonna help with like small improvements, but nothing unless like you can completely revamp the animations, and even that I don't think is like primary issue. Right, the game doesn't have players. I think it's just a lack of stuff to do.
Yeah, I don't know. The whole thing I would want to see is like casual interest in the competitive scene would be literally everything to me.
Yeah, that's it.
So, I don't know. I'll play around with, or I'll find people who would be interested in playing around with that sort of thing.
That's another way it could happen, I guess. Like, you fund money for someone to make it. Like, you know how to do it.
You pay a modder.
Yeah, you got Patreon mods, but seeing as like everyone's already paid Kickstarter, I mean, you could probably make it happen. I could probably like make a video like, hey, if you're a modder, I'm gonna pay you. We're gonna get community. I wonder how popular that would be though, and also you'd have to like have people willing to like get on board with the idea of the modes as well.
Yeah, you could also reach out to people who are good at modding in Unreal for other games too. In my opinion, I don't think it has to be a Mordhau, because maps and modes are not Mordhau specific things to be made in Unreal. Like, I guarantee you there are people who have experience modding in Unreal that are not Mordhau players that would still know how to, like, not revamp the combat because that's obviously Mordhau specific, but like...
Yeah, I saw someone's making like Helm's Deep and stuff.
Right.
And I had to look at his post history to see like what other mods he's made, and he's made mods for other games as well, so clearly he's like got Unreal experience.
Well, okay, I'll look into that then. But, so, in the immediate future, I'd like to run a 2v2 with a little prize pool on it. Do you think that'd be something people would participate in, assuming you were interested in it and that sort of thing?
It's difficult to say. I know there's like a general feeling of like people...
Apathy.
Yeah. But if I get on board with it, obviously I have to get a teammate. He's on boards. I know there's some players that usually will come on for tournaments anyway. So, and the thing is, we don't want many teams, right? So
Right.
I feel like we could fill it up to at the very least 8, but I'm sure we could get 16.
Okay, I'll set that up and send you info about it.
Awesome.
And then I'll see if there's anybody just sitting there who doesn't know any better who could just produce a god mod. I don't know, man. Maybe they exist. It's worth looking at, I think.
Well, also just have a read through like the
full document. Yeah.
That's probably the most fun part. Is just like brainstorming ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all. It's the most fun and the easiest at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. It's probably never going to end up happening, but like, yeah, this would be cool.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, that's kind of all I had to talk about, aside from like the obvious like NA drama, whatever.
All
But
NA drama,
I'm
yeah.
already kind of over it, to be honest.
It's not a big deal at all. It's just funny.
I had a big debate with some of the other guys at Venatus internally earlier, and basically what I said is, as much as we don't like trolling, I hope I can say this publicly already. I'm just gonna send it. But as much as we don't like trolling, there was no clear policy on it for Venatus, so it's not really fair to disqualify somebody from their first match in the proper league.
I think the DQ was maybe a bit unfair, but they were warned enough.
Yeah, they were warned enough.
They were losing.
Well, here's what we were going to do, is give them basically a one last chance moment where it's like, okay, we're not going to disqualify you, but if this happens again, then you're really fucked. Like, we can just disqualify them from the entire league, for example, if there's one incident of it, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the position we talked about internally. I don't know if that's been announced yet, but that's like where we're going with it is they're not going to be penalized for the actual league, but they are going to, obviously the disqualification in the qualifier tournament is going to hold because they were warned multiple times by the refs and just straight up ignored them. But there was too unclear of a precedent for us to comfortably like enforce it, so we're gonna fix our like policies.
There's nothing wrong with the call. They were warned. They knew not to do it. They were throwing, so the match wasn't really like that good anyway.
Sure.
Ultimately, nothing of value was lost.
No, I agree. And ultimately,
anyone saying that they weren't throwing is trolling, so just ignore them.
Right. And at the end of the day,
it's not a big deal. This won't happen again in other matches because as soon as it's a prize pool, then yeah, it won't happen.
It was almost a blessing in disguise that this happened in a qualifier that eventually doesn't really mean anything.
Well, it wouldn't have happened otherwise, right?
Right. No, I agree. But it's like,
well, if it did happen, it'd be like the OK kind, like VK does.
Well, it's like, at least it happened in a qualifier that means nothing instead of like a 4K prize tourney where, let's say in a hypothetical world you guys didn't listen to the refs and there was a big dispute because we thought it was fine.
Like, wow, look how dumb they are.
Well,
why would you,
I'm just saying, better to have this conversation. I'm saying, not the issue itself, but I'm saying the policies around it, right? Like, now this gives us an opportunity to be much more concise about where the line is.
I think I might have shot myself in the foot now, because now, like, people might make a rule against it. We've been doing it for content for a while, so hopefully... I don't want to see a rule where it's, like, no memeing, but, you know, there should be an expectation where, like, you don't meme against a team that's going to beat you. Like, you want to win. And if that happens, I mean, that won't happen if, like, there's money on the line, I would have thought. Like, how dumb would you be to like run 6 peasants in the finals when you could win like, I don't know, 4K? You know, still money worth winning.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think it would happen outside of this one scenario. So I wouldn't go ahead and like make a firm stance on it. I think it's part of the charm of the game. Like you can run peasants in tournaments, that's funny, but it's not funny when.
The issue is though, from an enforcement perspective, is we cannot have the rules be enforced by the teams under any circumstance. Like that's just not professional to say, well, you can only troll if the other team allows you to. Because then it's like before every match we'll have to be like, in the event that the enemy team runs a peasant loadout, do you care?
But if you listen to like Yang's reasoning, it's like it's not a tournament, doesn't matter. So this won't happen again. I don't think you guys need to make a rule. And in fact, I'd prefer you not to, because like it's better with less rules, and these things iron themselves out with money on the line.
We'll see. It's difficult to do. I don't necessarily want a rule that's like no peasant builds. But I definitely think we could put a rule that's like if you're playing in a way that jeopardizes the competitive integrity of the match, then the refs can call it out at their discretion, type thing. Because
I would stay away even from that, because then it's like.
Well, then how can we possibly tell somebody not to troll at any point?
Well.
Or throw or whatever.
Common sense, for one.
Well, right, but we can't have a rule that just says common sense and then we enforce it however we feel.
See, why not? Like you run the show. You can.
I know that's why I'm so adamant about being like. Specifically, I think it's because NA are much more of the pushers than EU.
It's discretion, right?
It is up to the ref's discretion, but I'm saying, how do we distinguish between?
Yeah, the ref knows.
Which peasant builds are? Yeah, fair.
For example, if it's against you, I can tell looking at a game that Killer 2 is never ever going to beat Tempest, right? So Tempest can do whatever the fuck they want. Everyone knows that. The DQ Tempest would just ruin the tourney. So that Tempest do Tempest.
So assuming that in scrims you do good against a team, you're then allowed to run troll builds against them. Is that like what we're actually saying?
Yeah, but what happens if they start losing? Is they'll stop trolling. As soon as it's like, okay, they're giving them a map. We actually want to win now. They'll stop trolling. It will fix itself.
So as long as the seeding follows the expectation, you control.
I don't think this happened. This situation won't happen again. So let's say the problem is when the underdogs troll, right? So the only situation that would happen is if like the underdogs are super defeatist, they go into this match and they're against like Tempest and they're like, we're just gonna lose, man. We're just gonna troll. Fuck it, let's just troll, dude. And then like, yeah, okay, they troll, they lose. They could have just forfeited as well. The problem is like if this happens in like the most important match of the finals, which it did happen in this case, but I can't see a scenario where the underdogs reach the finals and then say, let's just troll and lose, dude, when there's money on the line. They're gonna play, right?
Right. Yeah, no, obviously, but it's
But I
like.
don't think the situation ever happens again, and therefore it doesn't need rules.
So then, I guess it's just up to Venatus to have events where people are incentivized not to troll instead of having a rule against it. Is that what
Basically,
you're
if there's
saying?
a prize pool, this won't happen. If there's not a prize
Which
pool,
then just proves the whole argument's like pointlessness, because the only reason they did it in the first place
well,
is
my
because
whole
the matches are
argument is like
pointless.
if you're playing a tournament and you signed up for the tournament, that indicates you're interested in competing, and then if you just start trolling and throwing in a finals, that means like you're not interested in competing and you're wasting everyone's time, and therefore you should be.
Well, it was the flaw in the organization of the event, right? Because you had to play if you had any interest of competing in the actual league, which everyone does. But then,
To an
after a certain
extent,
point,
yes.
it just suddenly becomes pointless.
So if your only primary interest is in the scene is just money, which, like I said, it shouldn't be, because the money isn't even that much. So, you know.
Yeah, but it's like having stakes makes it more fun in a way. At the end of the day,
Yeah,
when you're just
definitely,
playing
but
like scheduled
winning it,
scrims against
like-
teams you don't really
like I
want to
said-
play.
I've been in the scene for years, man, and there was no money in Shiv, and it was still incredibly passionate. So that's what I'd expect. This may be a bit muddied now that there's a tiny bit of money now. People think it's like, okay, I'm too good to play this qualifier final. I think that's sad.
That's not that you're too good to. It's like a lot of these
Yeah, it
teams
is,
didn't.
like,
Okay,
They can't
well,
be bothered. Like we got better stuff to do. Let's play cards.
well, it's not even that as much as, man, I'm not really having fun, but I'll get through this. That way I can get to the league, because the league will probably be fun. So then all of a sudden when they realize, okay, well, now I don't even need to play this to be in the league. Why am I here? Does that make sense? It's like the frame of mind, I think, is part of what.
Well, not really, because I don't really understand if you don't find it fun. Why are you qualifying for the league and why are you playing the game? Why are
Well,
you
it's
doing
almost a bit of a sunk cost fallacy at the end of the day. It's like some of these players are really good at the game, but don't have too much fun with it. But they know they can at least get something back out of it if they stand to benefit in some way from it. So it's like, and they're also biding time, but until the game does get fixed, right? You're making it a better.
Yeah, but I feel like there should at least be a tiny. I don't care how like burnt out you are. You should still play in a tournament and like try and that should still be exciting to you. If it's not, then yeah, you should be DQ'd and probably consider whether or not you want to still play the game.
But so they have to choose between playing pointless matches or not participating in the league,
No,
basically.
no, look, it happens. Obviously, if they say they want to carry on playing the league, that's fine. It's just something I wouldn't expect to see, and like I said, I don't think it's going to happen again either. It's just like a funny thing that happened and
Okay.
milked some drama out of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's probably a middle ground between our opinions that needs to be reached, where I personally would.
No, I see the argument. I see it. It's just
It's not even
just
that I'm
a
saying
shame.
you're wrong either, because I do think trolling has a place where it's fun. But I know, for my part personally, I know we talked about this briefly in the utter chaos that was the video you posted. But when I wanted to watch EU, their like tourney or whatever, I queued it. This is actually
you weren't going to see a good match anyway. You would not have seen a good match. You should have seen if you. Like I don't like you tune in towards the semis to see the good matches, right?
sure, but it was like I was curious to see how much more
Right,
dominant you guys
saw
were.
something different, right? You saw something that's a spectacle.
Well, yeah, but it was like I tuned in to see the disparity in skill, and instead what I saw
You
was
saw it. We won just by fucking clowning around. That's as disparate. That's just how fucking disparate is that word.
okay. I wanted to
That's
see
how-
how that disparity manifested itself. How's that?
And that was probably the craziest thing you'll ever see in terms of like skill difference. Going 7-0, playing as like cavemen, like that's just insane. Like that's an ultimate flex. Anyone that says that's not like cool,
I get that it's a flex, but
yeah.
I guess I wanted to see
But
superior
these
mechanics
opponents
instead of a
crazy, like
flex.
we're outplaying knights with sticks.
No, I understand
like,
that. I
very
understand that it's
intense, yeah.
impressive. My point is basically when I clicked in to watch, after about 5 minutes, instead of being like, "Wow, this flex is captivating," I'm gonna keep watching. I just kind of clicked off and
Yeah,
dismissed.
it probably got old after a while. I agree.
It was like, I don't know. At some point, I think there's a line where it was crossed too far. Obviously, some will say that's just where the. It's like.
Also, if I feel like we were delaying the fight, like Nick said, it's about listening to referees. If we were like fucking around so much that we weren't engaging, we're just like running around the map, like the refs have got an argument to DQ us there. But so long as we're going for the fights, I think it's no problem.
Right, but then by that argument, you also one of the things you've said that I still kind of disagree with is as long as the team is going to win anyway, it's okay to troll. I feel like that's
No, like
kind
I
of an
said,
arbitrary
this
indicator.
rule doesn't. This is something like you can't make a rule for it. Like you're trying to make a rule for it because this issue won't happen again because it sorts itself out. It's something I would consider. It's like a personal thing. It's like if you enter a tournament, you should play to win. That's how I personally think. You might think it's okay to play a tournament and then like lose at a certain point, just throw the match for like no reason, or forfeit. It's entirely up to players to forfeit the tournament if they want to. I just don't want to see it.
I guess
it's really
so.
pathetic.
I guess the perspective that
You don't need to make a rule for it either, because like it's gonna. If so long as there's money, this won't happen.
well, sure, but it was like the perspective that kind of bothering me was. Well, I just want to finish this one point. Is that this tournament wasn't just like a prize pool community tournament, it was advertised on the homepage of the game. So somebody who knows nothing about the competitive scene comes to watch what competitive play looks like, and instead they just see people flexing on each other with rock throws. And it was like...
I think that's hyper. I mean, speaking from like an amount of interest in YouTube, I think a lot of people find it interesting and funny. So I think even from that argument...
So you think I'm just in the vast minority there, and I'm just out of touch?
No, I think there's a lot of people that find it disrespectful, but at the end of the day...
No, it's not even disrespect. It's more I want to see how the best players are playing, and instead what I'm seeing is...
So let's say you want to see a UFC fight, you want to see how the best UFC fighters fight, and then like this one guy fucking running jumps into his face and KOs him in 5 seconds flat. Like that happened, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't really reflect like the ultimate high level of UFC. It was like a really kind of ballsy thing to do, but it worked. And it's like, wow, like look at that guy, he's now like completely famous. It's kind of similar. Like you can't really, if you try and like keep
Thank you for the
people in
bits,
line
incompetent
too much,
user,
you
and the
get
follow,
more
man.
of a
Appreciate it.
boring display. And it's like, why bother? Like people that want to win, and you should want to win, and if there's an incentive to win, it will lead to the best strategies evolving.
Except when one
Unless
team is
like you
better and
just
then they
really
throw
want to
rocks.
fucking flex. And that game's not going to be interesting anyway, so I wouldn't really worry too much about it.
So you're
Like you
saying
said
because the game
yourself,
was
right?
never going to be of value, that's why you
You
decided
said
to troll?
yourself the 2v2 tournament finals was not hype, right? Because it was a stomp.
Yeah, correct. I
So
agree.
you weren't even interested in seeing PK stomp, right? By that logic.
No, I think... Well, okay. I think my perspective is a little biased
Gotcha.
because... What? No, I was going to say, my perspective is a little bit different in EU than it is in A, because in NA I already knew the player level, or the skill level of every player in the tourney when they signed up. Like, I knew who everyone was. Whereas when I went to EU, I didn't know who any of the teams or any of the players were, so I was curious to see what the skill disparity looked like. So, when I was greeted by rocks, I just kind of was like, okay, well, I guess everybody in EU sucks except VK.
I disagree. I think a stomp is boring wherever you see it. You don't need to know, like, you don't need to see like an Oceanus. Oh, sorry, an Australia. How do you say it? Oceania?
Oceanic, yeah. Or Oceanic,
Yeah,
but yeah.
you don't need to see an Oceanic stomp. You don't need like to know like what it's going to look like. It's just going to be pretty unfun. No one parries anything. They get rolled. You know.
Yeah, I honestly...
How can it be different to an NA stomp?
Well,
Besides like weapon choice and stuff, it's mostly going to be like the same thing.
I guess
Yeah,
for me...
I see what you mean. Like some people don't want to see like that level of.
It's like, for me,
Yeah.
I would rather... Maybe I'm just, like, weird this way, but I would rather see in a stomp an EU... Or, not an EU team. Stomp another team. I don't know why I said EU. Stomp an enemy team than just troll them until they, like, are so clearly defeated that it's not really funny. I'd rather just see how they beat them so dominantly, right? Instead of it being... I don't know. I guess you could make the argument that they were going to lose 7-0 regardless, so who the fuck cares how you get there. But...
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you see that against top teams. Like we went 7-0 in the finals as well against like one of the top 1 teams, and
something
kinda
about
see
it
that
just
as well.
doesn't sit well with me, though, having a tournament advertised on the homepage that is then trolled in.
The thing is, with this game though, it's not exactly the most serious game. So
Right.
if you play up frontline, you see this kind of stuff. So to see it in like the comp is kind of like they're not so different to us, kind of thing.
It's just like a Monty Python simulator, I suppose.
Yeah,
But I mean,
yeah.
like, you could make that same argument for Team Fortress 2, though, which is a game that has like a lot of cheeky humor that happens in like the pubs. But
I don't. We should get Big Man to talk about that. Maybe similar things happen there. Like people just run. That must happen, right? Running like spy loadouts against really bad teams, or just 6
Yeah,
spies or something.
but
Not,
generally, you're not gonna run like complete.
I'm sure it's happened though, right? It must have happened before. Like someone runs like a complete meme loadout and wins.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's happened, but it also would not have happened in a tournament that was advertised like heavily. And by heavily, I mean it was on the homepage of the game. Not that Team Fortress 2 did that, but it was like.
I think part of the issue is like there's so much more room for the BM in this game. Like literally being a peasant.
Yeah.
Whereas, what's the most BM thing you could in TF2? Just like play a class that's not considered good, but still like a combat class, right?
There's lots of lots of ways to troll in that game. But that's the point. Is not.
I mean, if this game was serious, yeah, you'd probably see rules like.
Well, I'm saying I think the tone
Oh.
should be different between the competitive scene and pubs. I
It
guess
depends
is what I'm
like
getting
how hands-on you want to get. Like, isn't League of Legends like really strict with this stuff? It's like you must not like toy around with your opponents at all. Because I remember there's like some deal where
at. Correct.
one team played like 5 support, or they like banned 5. What was it? Like they were playing against like an all-female team and they banned 5 supports or something. And then someone said they were griefing. I don't know. There's something
Yeah,
like that.
it's
So obviously,
still-
like other esports are more hands-on with like what is acceptable behavior. But I think with this game and its current form, like it's not popular at all. I think we should kind of embrace like the sillier side of it.
I still think there should be higher standards for the competitive scene than just throwing rocks at each other. I don't know that I've been convinced otherwise. I know that it's free content for you guys because you're content creators and it's like an easy post that you can just
Yeah,
put
there
up.
definitely was more to that tournament than that though. In fact, I didn't want to upload the actual grand final itself because the team chat was like so fucking stressful, man. Like, I don't want to put people on blast for like how they talk and like they're trying to hype themselves up. Like, it's not, it's a very deeply personal thing, I think. So that's the content I didn't want to put on YouTube. But that's just an indicate, like, just to show like how serious we get when it's actually serious. Like, shit means it means something to us to win.
And this is a
Maybe
little
we
bit
should have
meta.
uploaded that as well.
This is
It's
a little
just
bit
to show
meta.
it's not sort of memeing.
This is a little bit of a meta point, but what is the motivating factor to win that makes EU players jive to the point of cheating just to win a tourney for no money?
It's just to be number one, just to be the best. That's why you started playing. That's why I started playing Shiv anyway. It's just, well, not to be number one, but to improve. And then when you get to that point where like, wow, I can actually be the best player. That's crazy.
So why is it so different in NA? I wonder. I feel like people in NA definitely want to win too, but there's like a different.
We're kind of reaching that stage now.
Yeah. Again, I don't want to make
People
verses.
are getting less interested in winning and playing every tournament. But like in Shiv, anyone could host a tournament. People would play it. Like, you could just host anything. Like Monk or BMM, but he was like very young. He hosted a tournament where he had to leave halfway through because it was like past his bedtime and people still played that shit. So yeah, but now maybe there's a bit of burnout.
Yeah, I think it's also like this game. It's a little bit trickier to set up fun events because a lot of the game modes people are just burnt out on, which is kind of going back to the point you've already discussed. So I don't want to run in circles, but basically like new game mode would breathe a lot of life into the game. I am genuinely going to look into seeing if it'd be possible to create some sort of a game mode custom, because I mean, somebody's got to do it, right? And if, like, Gear has already taken the initiative with starting the whole modding things to fix the comp scene trend. And while I don't think the combat is the answer necessarily, I'm glad that he's putting in the effort, and I'm happy to try and match that if there's any way I can, or other people can contribute. So we'll see what that turns out to. It could even be as simple as what you said, was literally just like putting up money to fund somebody to mod the comp mode for us.
That's definitely one avenue. Yeah.
I don't know. We'll look at it. I don't really have anything else for you, so I don't want to keep you beyond whatever you're doing.
That's awesome. That was pretty in depth. Yeah.
Yeah, fun conversation. Thank you for chatting with me.
Hey, no problem, man. Catch you around.
See ya.
See ya.